Let's get into the next recommendation around messaging. So you don't want to come across as being tone deaf or unaware as to what's going on. So how do you suggest people, revisit their messaging?
Yeah, and this, like I'd put this one back on you, right, as our brand and product marketing guy. But basically, like tone deaf. You know what I mean? Like that's the first place I would go is just make sure you're not. I mean, the pandemic was an easy one, because there was actually something going on and people sick and stuff like that. So like that recession, similar. But like if you're out there hawking Lambos and stacks of cash, in your ads, like maybe that's not the right messaging. So it's like you just want to do a first pass, because longer term, and this is what I'd like you to talk about a little bit. Longer term, you may want to just look at shifting the messaging generally, but in a more thoughtful, like way that might take a little bit more time. But that first pass is like, let's just make sure I'm not tone deaf and like making people upset with what I have out there that just doesn't match what everybody's dealing with.
Yeah, I think for me, and this is something that we're really trying to do with some of the new campaigns and content ideas that have come up in the last week or so, is just be transparent, be aware of what's going on, be open about it, don't hide from it, don't pretend that nothing is happening right now in the outside world. And I think just recognizing that and understanding how your audience is being impacted by this, and just being very clear, it's not a rocket science like type concept, just with them that, hey, I get what you're going through right now. I get that you probably had your budget cut by 40, 50, 60%, and maybe your targets stayed the same, maybe they were decreased a little bit, but if they weren't, here's how we Metadata can help you hit your number doing XYZ. So it's really just being aware of what's going on. It's not anything crazy, just very few companies do it, and they keep pretending that, hey, all is great right now, don't worry about it, and that's not what people want to hear.
Yeah, and hopefully your product that you're marketing is good in times of like a great economy, and also equally as good in times of like a suffering economy. And that's where like that messaging shift comes into play. It's like, okay, ours is easy because like, in times of good, great, put more money in, get more leads, get more demos, you know what I mean? Like rising, gets all the boats floating. In times of like pullback, we can pivot our messaging very easily to like, you can't waste $1 of ad spend, you have to be as efficient as possible. The platform works the same way, you know what I mean? But in times of good, it does something for you, and in times of like not so good, it's still doing something for you. And so hopefully you've got, as the product you're marketing, you have that clear of a way, you know what I mean, to shift the messaging that still makes sense. Like I think you can hurt yourself if you try and shoehorn in messaging around a recession if your product just has nothing to do with it. Like there's literally like there's no change in it, and you're trying to shoehorn it in. Like I don't have a good example, but I'm sure there's tons out there. You could actually do yourself, I think, a disservice. You could like hurt your brand if you do it that way. So first make sure that you actually can, and it makes sense to consumers. Like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I can see that.
Yeah, I think there's two things that you'll start to see from us from how we change our messaging a bit to weather this. And the first is somewhat of what you mentioned, being eliminating wasted ad spend, because, and we're not pitch slapping you here, but we're just showing you how the message is going to change a little bit. You don't have ad spend to waste right now because your budget has already been cut significantly. So really leaning into how we eliminate wasted ad spend. And then the second part is, maybe you weren't on the hook for generating pipeline and revenue prior to this, but now more than ever, you're going to be expected to generate pipeline and revenue. So why wouldn't you use a tool that can help you do that during a time like this?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And the more you can get people to understand, like, again, using this platform will save or make you, like, it's really getting over that hump of whatever you're spending on it, you're going to make or save that or more, and that's really that's part of also telling that clear ROI story, which we'll get into in a little bit too.